What is up, my friends? Welcome to a brand new global economic report. We are going to be reporting on America. Yes, US of A, I salute you. So US student debt has toppled $166 billion. The Social Security beneficiaries list is going through the roof, and we have $21 trillion unaccounted for out of the bailout in 2007 and 2008. All right, let's not waste time. Let's get right into it. I've got a lot that I want to cover today with you. Going to go into things a little bit differently. I hope you like the format. Hope you like the style. If you want to show support, it's simple, guys. Just click the thumb button. Click the thumbs up. That's all you got to do. If you like what we're putting out here, then go ahead and click the subscribe button, hit the bell notification. You'll get some notifications sometimes from YouTube, and you'll know kind of more so what's going on. If you got some comments, place those below as well. But let's dive into this. All right, reported on the 16th. I've been keeping up on this. I was actually going to shoot a dedicated video months ago on this. Kind of forgot. But U.S. student debt topples $166 billion. So there is a lot of problems going on that we are going to hopefully string this along into a nice, beautiful storyline called "There's too much debt, not enough new people being born, not enough new ways to get it," right? So you need, for GDP to keep growing, you need growth. For the money that you print out to be fulfilled and to be paid back to you, you need taxable dollars. So we either raise taxes, or there's a combination of raising taxes and having a nice sustainable growth of brand new population and immigrant population. None of that's happening, okay? And you'll see in just a couple minutes. It's gone up a lot. So by the fourth quarter, it hit $166.4 billion. And there's really no solutions that they're presenting for this, whereas there's many that they could do. They could allow refinancing. They could push out some sort of zero interest. They could have jobs, first jobs, and employers out of college helping in some sort of way to mitigate this and come up with some sort of program to pay this back. Bloomberg calculated the dollar amounts from the Federal Reserve Bank of New York's quarterly household debt report, which includes only the total owed and the percentage delinquent at the last 90 days or in default. That percentage has remained around 11% since mid-2012, but the total increased to a record $1.46 trillion in December 2018. And unpaid student debt also rose to the highest levels ever, guys, ever. Delinquencies continued to climb even as the unemployment rate fell below 4%, suggesting the U.S. strong job market. Okay, so job market is down, even though Trump is on TV saying job stimulus and job growth is up. Well, not his mouth. What the market is saying is obviously different. Jobs are down. Delinquencies are up. Not just student loans. We've got the whole consumer debt bubble as well that I actually left out of this video. Okay, so here we are at socialsecurity.gov. Now, we've got a lot of different numbers here. The only one that's really gone down is survivors. This is the total, meaning 1, 2, 3, 4, all added up. We've got individual totals for different aspects of beneficiaries of Social Security. But just look at this number. Look at this total number here. Okay, follow this one as we go down. What's happening here, guys? It's going up, right? Record high 62 million people collecting right now. Now, we might get away with a couple years because of generational gap that seem to be occurring right now. We might get away with a couple years where it starts to dip a little bit, but that's not going to matter because there's going to be such a backlog and such a pile of people that haven't gotten anything and still, still are owed, that I don't think it's going to actually matter. Here's another way to look at that. All beneficiaries are in blue. You notice that it's going, it's on quite a good parabolic curve here. Here's the next piece that I talked about. Turns out I didn't actually know this until just the other day. I didn't know that the real number on the bailout, the Fed bailout in 2000, let's call it 2007 to 2009, okay, because the problem started in 2006, and well, arguably before that, but it's when people started to notice it in 2006. It hit from 07 to 09, but the amount that was actually paid out was $29 trillion. This is by the Levy Economics Institute. This isn't just like some made-up paper by somebody who doesn't like the government or something like that. This is actually a credible paper, credible research publication. Estimates of the total amount of bailout funding provided by the Fed have ranged from its own lowball claim of $1.2 trillion to Bloomberg's estimate of $7.7 trillion just for the biggest banks, and to GAO tally of $16 trillion. But new research conducted as a part of the Ford Foundation project directed by senior scholar L. Randall Wright finds that the Fed's commitments in the form of loans and asset purchases to prop up the global financial system far exceeded that. $29 trillion. Go along with that. Apparently, Uncle Sam cannot account for $21 trillion, which this is just funny. This is, I don't even know how else to say it. This is just ironic and funny because, as a taxpayer, you can't slip up. You can't miss anything or you'll get audited, right? You get your nuts slammed in the door. We have the Pentagon Audit that they failed, and they said, well, at least we actually did the audit. Nobody actually thought we would pass the audit, but hey, you're welcome because we did it. That's essentially what they said. Remember, I covered this. So they failed, the Pentagon failed the audit. Uncle Sam's missing $21 trillion. There's been leaks and reports out of how much they were charging for obnoxious things like toothbrushes being $1,300 and things like that on the actual books and the accounting records. But it's just fascinating to me that all of this is okay and there's zero accountability. But for regular people like you and me, again, we would be fried for this. We'd be fried and paraded around as like the biggest disgrace in human history. Don't worry though, guys. Axios tells us that we shouldn't worry about national debt because it's never mattered. This I thought was a really interesting piece. What I wanted to talk about is, I'm going to talk more about Warren Buffett's annual letter here in just a second, but his annual shareholders letter is actually out. And so they talk about the fact that he had a $9.8 billion goof up in Kraft Heinz, but he hasn't talked about it yet. He hasn't admitted it, but he's going to do his round of TV interviews. I think he usually does that the next week. I think the report just came out. It appears to have the annual letter. And so he usually does a round of interviews and stuff after this. So maybe he'll bring it up there. Buffett has a lesson. In his letter for those who regularly preach doom because the government budget deficits, he admits that he was once one of those individuals himself, but he's not anymore. Buffett divides America's history into three 77-year periods. The last period happens to coincide with his investing career, which started in 1942 with $114.75 of savings. Buffett was fortunate enough to begin investing at such an auspicious time, which shortly predated a stunning wartime ramp up in America's debt to GDP ratio. I mean, it was just great. It's a bubble, arguably the everything bubble has been his life and his generation. I think a lot of people are coming to this new realization that, even though he's done extremely well, there are other variables besides luck that have come into play as well, and that we don't necessarily need to idolize these people. At the end of the day, he is a regular human being. The bottom line that Solomon says here, there's no evidence from 240 years of American history that the level of the national debt has ever really mattered. The U.S. prints its own currency and can borrow as much as it likes, increasingly from domestic investors. Per Buffett, deficit hawks have preached doom for decades. They have never been proven correct. And you know what? In some instances, I would actually say that's correct. Just like the gold and silver bugs, been standing on the sidelines for all this time saying that this big economic crash is coming. Well, the economic crisis was 2007 through 2009, but they got a bailout. If they wouldn't have bailed them out, then fractional reserve banking would have been proven to have failed. Not capitalism, but fractional reserve banking, which I think would have been great. Quantitative easing stopped in 2014, apparently, but the point that I'm going to say here is that it hasn't mattered so far. That doesn't mean that the model will always sustain this. And so especially when we see big changes happening in the model. So let's jump over to this here. U.S. population census projections. This is kind of scary stuff. According to the latest 2017 consensus projection, they expect a near halving of the population growth, or 50 million fewer Americans than expected just 8 years earlier. So in 2017 through 2018, there were 700,000 less births as projected by 2008 consensus. Consensus is actually really important because that's how they figure out deficit numbers. That's how they ballpark GDP, and it's looking down the line to figure out what you can do today. But between immigration, as I mentioned earlier, between immigration and new childbirths, that's kind of part of where the money comes from and gets paid back to the government in taxes and just through the equation of life. So if those numbers start to go down considerably, then again, it leaves you to question who's going to hold the bag at the end of the day. Who's going to hold the bag? And some even more interesting stuff to add on top of that. So we literally now have the world's, Buffett, I would say, is like the world's leading expert, right? Everyone listens to Buffett with money talk, right? So he's saying now, don't worry about it, which I've never seen him come out and say that. We have that going on. We have consensus numbers down, debt numbers are up, experts are telling us not to worry. What does this sound like? Sounded familiar, right? And now we have some other interesting things starting to come out, which is that we have the IMF on February 5th. I did a dedicated video just about this. You can look a few videos back if you want to check that out. How do we get below zero is the conversation now being had, more so than ever, okay? This conversation, it's been around for a while, since the early 2000s, but now it's starting to ramp up. We have the IMF exclusively talking about this and talking about this dual currency system with cash and with a e-money. Now, right now, these are the only two countries who have a 500 base point buffer to sustain interest rate drops during an economic crisis. Iceland 250, everybody else, not enough. How can we go below zero? Cash can't go away. They've studied this now for a very long time, and they've decided unanimously that we can't get rid of cash right now. But what they're talking about is an e-money that would be issued electronically. Funny enough, we've already got that. We've got Bitcoin. We've got cryptocurrencies. Ripple XRP is what I'm thinking they're going to fill in on this slot, because stablecoins don't really make much sense. And Ripple has already nestled itself in really, really tightly with the global machine, let's call it. You can check out my last video to see an in-depth deep dive into Ripple. Even if you don't care about cryptos, I just think it's really interesting and it'll help you connect some dots. There's two conversations going on. How do we get below zero, or how do we move the goalpost? How do we rethink the inflation target? That's another conversation that's being ramped up and talked about. The Fed Reserve Chairman, Jerome Powell, he's actually going to do his regular testimony in front of Capitol Hill this week. That's a regular thing. I didn't know about that until just this last year. So that conversation is happening at the federal bank level, the central bank level. It's happening at IMF, International Monetary Fund. It's happening everywhere. They're talking about maybe raising their targets above 2%, but the general public would freak out. So they're trying to come up with, and essentially what this is, guys, that I just talked about with this negative interest rate dual currency system, that's a bail-in. That's like 2012 Cyprus without them robbing 30 to 40% of your money overnight from the banks. And this is the thing that I wanted to talk about here. Berkshire Hathaway held on to $112 billion this year in US Treasury bills and other cash equivalents. Now, they normally only keep 20 billion in this on the side fund as liquidity, let's call it, okay, or cash equivalent to guard off extreme situations. And they held this year 112 billion because everything's too much. Everything's too much money. It's too expensive. So we have everything at, for the most part, record highs. We saw some bumps with the S&P 500 around Christmas time, which there was a meeting on Christmas Day to inject more cash into the system, into the beast, to keep things going. But are you seeing now, through just the few breadcrumb pieces that I gave you now, there's a big problem that's already here, not mounting, it's already here. And I'm failing to see ways out of this. Now, ways out of this for yourself as a sovereign individual would be to stock up on things that keep their purchasing power. Gold, silver. I would even say cryptocurrencies I think are going to make it. But not all of them, just some. Bitcoin I like a lot because there's no boss, there's no CEO, there's no shutting it down unless you shut down the internet. It is completely decentralized, even though a lot of the mining comes out of China, yes. And even though there's, just like anything, wallets, there's a certain amount of wallets that hold a lot and a certain amount of wallets that don't hold a lot. That's just how it goes. That to me is natural and organic, to have whale positions and then everybody else underneath that. But those are ways that you can shore up your own safety without getting too prepperish. That this isn't a prepper channel. If you want to get into that stuff, you can find somebody else. But anyways, I hope you guys found this valuable. I'll have all the links underneath the video like usual. And I'd love to hear your thoughts on this. I'd love to hear what you're thinking after hearing this information. Okay, guys, that's it for this video. Thank you so much for tuning in all the way till the end. And I really appreciate you. If you want to go ahead and show us some support beyond just liking the video, subscribing, all that good stuff, we do have a Patreon underneath the video. $1 does go a long way. People think that it doesn't. $1 every single month ensures that we can do so much more, and it helps us handle things on our end so that we can continue to deliver and bring you the best possible, highest quality videos that we can, my friends. And there'll also be a slew of affiliate links on stuff that we use on a regular basis every single day if you want to support us in that sort of way. Also appreciate that as well. That's it for this video. Stay tuned. We'll have more uploads this week for you, my friends. Bye.